I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 9 to the Sky. So today we get into one of the biggest tech mods of all time, and yes, I am talking about Mekanism. And so far with Mekanism, we've barely scratched the surface. I mean, the one thing we did automate was a compressing factory, and that just basically allows osmium to be kind of injected into other materials. But today, we are really going to up our game. We're going to gain access to every tier upgrade inside of Mekanism, and I'm going to experiment with a way to do that. And yes, we're going to be utilizing applied energistics for this. So in this episode, expect to learn a couple of things. How AE AutoCrafting works when interfacing within Mekanism, and also how subnets work within applied energistics. And on top of that, we're going to be diving into an add-on mod for applied energistics that allows us to power our machines from our applied energistics cables. Now let's first talk about why we're doing this in the first place, getting into Mekanism. Now, throughout this pack, we are going to need to progress into Mekanism, ultimately making a fission reactor and then producing antimatter and pellets from polonium and plutonium. Both of those things are going to require quite a bit of advanced machines in order to get there. And this all requires a sort of progression that is built into Mekanism. And that progression basically requires you to go through 3 different types of materials that you need to process. And those 3 tiered major components are going to be infused alloy, reinforced alloy, and atomic alloy, all requiring a, you guessed it, metallurgic infuser in order to upgrade into this process. Now, I've done this countless times in countless different ways, and today I'm going to be exploring a new way of doing it. Now, we're still going to be using a on-demand crafting system, but we're going to tweak it just a little bit. Now, I almost forgot to mention, but the basic control circuit we also need to produce, and technically we would have 5 metallurgic infusers all running technically at once if we were also processing steel. But because we have steel seeds, we get to kind of bypass this. So we're really going to only have about 4 metallurgic infusers inside of our automation system. So I guess without further ado, let's get to how we're actually going to automate these. So first things first, we need our 4 metallurgic infusers, and I have them all crafted up here ready to go, and I've also deconstructed the thing that we had set up here. Now, these metallurgic infusers aren't the only thing we're going to need in order to technically get this automation up and rolling. We're also going to want 4 enrichment chambers, well, at least for the setup that I plan on doing today. And this is going to allow us to take a raw essence, for example, redstone. And if we take a look at how this is used inside of Mekanism, we will see that in this process right here, to items to infuse type, we'll see that just 1 redstone gives us 10 millibuckets, but if we enrich it, and we take a look at the enrichment here, you'll see that this basically turns it into 8 times the amount of redstone that it was before it was enriched. So the Enrichment Factory is just as simple as literally sending redstone into it, and it can produce the product, which is 8 times more. So definitely worth enriching, and that's why I have all of these enrichment chambers here. And what I want to do with them is I want to have them placed underneath each of these machines. So I'm going to kind of spread them out like so. And we're going to have our sort of mixture of machines set up like this. We might have another machine here in the middle later on, but for this, we'll just set them up like so. And then I'm going to have my, these are the infusing factories, which are the upgraded version of the metallurgic infuser, which we're going to be upgrading all of these machines very, very soon. But the idea is I'm going to back here send items into this. It's going to do the process, and then it's going to send the items up into the infusion factory. We just kind of have to set our inputs and outputs correctly. Now, something that's going to be very handy to you is a configuration card, and we're going to be using this a lot throughout the series, but the configuration card allows you to copy settings from one machine to another of the same type. So if I go ahead and, for example, I clear these settings on the item routing right here, and I say I want my top to be the output because we want it to auto output. So we click the auto eject, and I want the back to be the input where it receives the item because that's where we're going to be working from. Now that I have this set up, I can just simply hold down shift and right click, and then I can just paste this into all of my other machines, and those configurations get copied and pasted over. Now for the upper machine, we're going to want this slot down here. So the yellow slot to be on the bottom. So it's already configured correctly, But I'm just going to go ahead and clear everything just so we have this set up correctly. So I want the extra to be from the bottom, which is going to be receiving there. And technically, I want the top to be an output and input, because that's where we're going to be placing our pattern provider. And so we want it to send the items, and then the items that it's produced to be sent back into the pattern provider, ultimately completing our AutoCraft. Now, up to this point, you've probably got a good understanding so far of how these pattern providers work. That is going to be the simple part of this. Basically, we're going to request the item, it's going to send the ingredients. And we're going to have items automatically sending into the bottom, for example, the redstone and all of the other components. But that still leaves us with one thing. I wanted to show off how we can actually use subnets. And now believe me, you don't have to use a subnet for this, but if you don't know how the concept of one works, this is a great example to show you how. Now, I simply just want to send a couple of items into each of these enrichment chambers. So to create a subnet that has access to items, we're going to have to use an item interface. Now, this is going to use one channel off of the main line in order for this to work, but it's going to allow us to gain 8 more new channels that still have access to the items. And the way that we gain access is through this storage bus. So by attaching a storage bus on here, we technically gain access to all of the items in here. And this storage bus, even though it's connected on this side, it is not powered. You can see the device is offline. So what we can do to gain power is we can connect this like so, and we can actually use quartz fibers in here to send this now power. So this is routing around, just simply sending power to this, allowing us to use, for example, exporters. And let's say over here, we want these two setups here to both receive redstone. And that's about as simple as we can get. So I'm going to go ahead and run my cables down, and then I just need to tell this to send redstone to these enrichment chambers. And that is exactly what this is going to do. So now both of these are receiving redstone because they've tapped into this network. And a really cool way to see this is with a terminal. So if we attach a terminal to this bottom link down here, we can still see all of our items that are inside of our storage. And that's pretty neat. But what's really cool is this now has 8 channels to work with. So we could export items, for example, but we cannot use this to, for example, request a craft. That is the only weird problem that we just don't have access to when connected this way. Now, you definitely don't have to use this, but this was me trying to show you how a subnet works in case you didn't know. Now, I may have fibbed just a little bit earlier when I said we only needed 4 of these. Well, technically we need 5 metallurgic infusers, and that's because I forgot about the process of the atomic alloy. So to be able to make atomic alloy, we do need refined obsidian, and refined obsidian requires basically taking and enriching obsidian to turn it into obsidian dust, and then using diamond, the process we're already doing, to make the refined obsidian dust. And then that can be enriched and sent to another machine. So a way that we can do that and integrate it into our current system is by simply placing our metallurgic infuser right here. And the way that we can do that is because this enrichment chamber is going to be already producing the diamond material. So we might as well infuse it into this infuser. So to do that, we just need to make sure the output is on the left side, and make sure this can receive the extra on the right side. And that should start to fill up. Now we are going to need an enrichment chamber. So I do have this prior enrichment chamber that we had earlier, and this enrichment chamber is going to go on top. And so what we're going to do is we are going to send the obsidian into this enrichment chamber using an export bus. So that should be pretty straightforward. And we're going to make sure our obsidian can be auto-crafted. So obsidian goes in here, and then we're just going to need a crafter card. So that, if we have the config set up with input here and output on the bottom, that should automatically send the coal down into the bottom. And that's going to go in here. And that's going to start to produce this. But we're going to need an importer on the back to start to receive this, this material. And so we should be able to set up an import bus right here. And so that is going to now send back into the system. And this is connected to our subnet, remember? So this is going to place it directly into our storage. Now there's a little bit of a problem with this because that means this is just going to continuously run forever, and we don't really want it to run forever. And this is where a new item from Applied Energistics comes into play, and that is a level emitter. Now, the way that a level emitter works is we can define some parameters in here, and it can send redstone signals to things. So what we can do is we can take some of the refined obsidian that we're going to have, right? Some of this refined obsidian, we can place it in this slot, and we can say if the amount goes over, for example, 64, if we keep that inside of our inventory, our Applied Energistics system, then we can tell it to do certain things. For example, in this case, emit when levels are above or equal to limit. And this is pretty straightforward. Whenever it goes above 64, it's going to emit a signal. Now, you can play around with your signals in here. By default, what this is going to do, if you lit it on normal mode, is it's not going to operate, as you can see right here, unless it has a signal. That's not what we want. We actually want it to be inverted, so that way when it does receive a signal, it will shut off. And so you'll see, if we send it a signal, this will then shut off the machine. Now, notice this is actually within that block space, so we are going to have to change this up a little bit to be able to get this signal to send here. So what we're going to need to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to route my cable underneath here fully. And this is why being small is very nice. We can go ahead and just set it up here, and then we can drag that refined obsidian, and just by leaving it in its default state, we can set it to 64. And then as soon as this fills with 64 inside of our inventory of that material, it will then shut this machine off. And that's probably going to be one of the easiest ways to set that up. Now, something I'd like to note, this is not the most efficient way of doing it. However, this is very compact, as you can see by all of the machines being right next to each other. I have set this up in many different ways. I've set it up in All the Mods 9 in a totally different manner. Volcano Block was also in a very different manner. Both of those, one used refined storage, one used Applied Energistics. So if you're interested in seeing other ways of setting up this automation, definitely check out those videos. All you have to do is search ChosenArchitect and Mekanism, and it will surely pop up. Now back to the rest of this setup. For example, back here, I have my exporter just sending diamonds into this enrichment chamber, which is then going to supply this one also with enriched diamond. This is perfect, because this is what we're going to actually use to craft reinforced alloy. So this is going to take that infused alloy that we are producing over here, and it's going to send it over here to be turned into the reinforced. And then over here, this is the final little setup that we're going to need, and that is going to be enriching the refined obsidian. So since we're already producing that, we just need to bring a cable on and an exporter. And here we go again. This is why that subnet is just super nice, because we don't have to worry about utilizing all of our main channels off this line. Notice this still only is using 6 channels in this setup because of this little line down here, which is very, very nice. So this is something handy to know how to do, especially when you start running into an issue with channels. So let's place our export bus, and we are going to bring our enriched, or not our enriched, we're going to be bringing our refined obsidian into here to be enriched, and all of our configs should be set up properly. But now we need to get power into our machines, and I don't know if this is going to work with a subnet, but I'm going to try. And that is, I want to try and power my systems here utilizing, you guessed it, the add-on mod that I talked about earlier. And that add-on mod is none other than Applied Flux. So essentially, we should be able to store power inside of our Applied Energistics system and use these induction cards to power our machines. Now, these are going to require a new type of processor, and that just uses this charged circuit here, which it does look like we can also make inside of our energizing orb, which is very nice. And for now, I'm just going to do this by hand. It takes some redstone, it takes some Flux, all submerged in water in order to get these redstone crystals, which we can use to at least make a 1K energy storage component. Oh, and by the way, to be able to get the press, it's just an iron block inside of here, and that grants us a press. And I'm going to place that just connected to this setup down here. Because of the press being in here, it shouldn't be able to receive any other item than the one that it's looking for example, which is going to be this energy press. And of course, here's the fun conversion of all of the items mixing in the water real quick. Eventually we'll have an automated setup for this, but this is super simple to do right now just by hand. And there we go. So that should get us 64 of those little redstone dots. And I did go ahead and set up the AutoCraft, for example, for these. And that's going to send that over here to then be AutoCrafted 3 at a time. Now with this setup, I'm not sure how well this is going to work. Now it may work better for other machines, and we might not effectively use this for all of these machines, but I do want to at least try this out. So the applied flux, I have myself a storage disk now, and we have our induction cards, and then I also have myself a capacitor I need to make. So, or the flux accessor. This is how we're supposed to be able to put and pull power from our network. So we should be able to send power into our network from here. And then I just need to store this inside of a card. So our power is going to get stored inside of here, and then we can use it everywhere else. So let's go ahead and try to put power in. So I'm going to do that with this, and you can see it is maxing out the capacity, storing the power inside of this storage disk. And I have no idea how much RF this actually stores. This is going at like oh my gosh. That's 400 million FE that is storing. That's a 4K disk. That is so much power that is now housing. Okay, so I'm assuming eventually that will build up. Then our reactors are definitely firing now. And what I want to do is I now want to use these induction cards to try and send power into this machine. Now notice this is already full. This one is not full. So if I put this induction card in here, let's see, can we put it in here? We're supposed to be able to send the induction card in. I guess export buses don't export power. That's kind of an interesting thing. Maybe it has to be this top card. No, it cannot go. Interesting. It can't be used on an export bus. So that kind of defeats, I think, the purpose of this. If I can't use it, for example, on an export bus to be able to power this, at least that's my way of thinking how this is supposed to work. Now, for example, this machine right here doesn't have power. So if I toss, oh, I just threw them in the return. If I toss this in here, as you can see, this now has power. Okay, so that's pretty neat that we can at least use it on the pattern providers. I just don't know why, for example, the export buses do not accept these cards for power. Is it just pattern providers? It says ME interfaces, pattern providers, extended interfaces, and extended pattern providers. That's really limiting on what you would need to use these for, because I would really want to use them, for example, on an import bus. Now, it is cool to be able to get into this mod, but like I said, it may not be 100% necessary. Yeah, in this particular case, I'm still probably going to use gates, and we're going to upgrade our gates over time. And this should get this whole thing up and running. Here I am, back to using gates. I really thought this was going to be a substitute for this sort of setup, but the fact that we can't use it inside of these buses really do change my entire idea around this setup. It still has its use cases, I think, but yeah, not as useful as I thought. Now for storing power, my goodness, I don't even know if I want it to continue doing that, because we have no need for storing that much power just yet. And I also don't want to store it, I think, here. I want to store it in that draconic energy cube eventually, which is a little bit cooler to see than storing it inside of a disk. You know, not all of them are winners, not all of them, but hey, I really do love the idea of how that works. That is honestly kind of ridiculous. So I guess after that derail, back to how this whole setup is going to work. So as of right now, all we have to do is make our patterns, and that is super simple for sort of finishing us out here. So we just need to make our basic circuit, and thankfully we don't have to worry about this redstone. It's just going to be sending the item and looking to receive the product. So we can put that in here, and then next will be the infused alloy, and the recipes for these have never been easier to make with this particular setup. You just send iron, make the infused, because other setups that I've done require you to make sure your specific values are set appropriately, which can be kind of confusing to do when you're building your first patterns. So this is very, very simple, as you only have to worry about the one item going in and then the other item being pulled back out. Oh, it doesn't get any easier than this. And this is going to get incredibly fast. You can see I messed up there. This is going to get insanely fast after we get all of this fully up and running. So now that we have this ready to go, we can start to AutoCraft all of the upgrades that allow these machines to be increased in speed. The main things we want to AutoCraft are going to be the speed upgrades. We might as well also include gas upgrades, but speed upgrades for sure. Now this is going to require osmium dust and certain kinds of dusts. And it might be a good idea, I think, if we're going to be doing these dusts, to also set up a crushing factory over here as well. Like we can just tap it in over here and just put a pattern provider on it. And then also I do want to get my compressor set back up. And of course, on the crushing factory, we want to make sure it's input output so it auto ejects it back into our system. And so all of these individual upgrades we now should be able to build patterns for. For example, the osmium. That's as simple as sending it right here, ingot form turning into dust. And then this is going to be gold. We want to make sure to turn that into dust, and so on and so forth going in here. And later we can actually upgrade these pattern providers into extended versions, which will support way more items. Now, I also can't forget the tier installers, as these are what's going to allow us to upgrade our machines into the highest tier, which is going to allow us to process more items at once. So now, after all of that, I have a ton of different things from Mekanism here that I now have auto-crafted. Now, something to keep in mind, if you are going to be using these tier installers, whenever you do set up the auto-crafts for them, keep in mind that you have to upgrade your first tier first. For example, like this, you have to go into this first tier, and then you start working on the next tier, which will be the advanced, and so on and so forth. So, like if I was to make 10 advanced, that's going to start sending these items into here. Some things that I definitely need to get set up as soon as possible are like the speed upgrades and energy upgrades, especially in these machines. They take 8 each, so you'll need 8 per machine, and that'll really get this sped up. Now, I just want to demonstrate this right now. That refined obsidian that we set up earlier has gone over the amount, but notice this machine has shut off. So the redstone has initiated. It is now just dumping that remaining amount. You can see right there, a little bit will spill over, but setting it at that 64 has actually sent the redstone signal to shut down this machine, which is exactly what we wanted to see from that level emitter. So now at this point, I have all of my upgrades inside of my machines. I have 8 energy and 8 speed. These things run very quickly, and as we continue to upgrade them, it's only going to get faster. So just to demonstrate right now, we're at advanced tier, and if we were to craft up 10 of the next tier, which is elite, to be able to upgrade these machines, we're going to see how quickly this can do it. So we're seeing how quick now it's making those infused alloy because it has a stockpile of redstone. And same over here. As soon as these have finished, this is going to start automatically sending them over here. And we don't really have to worry about the auto export because this should automatically sort. Right now we have it set to on, so that has copied those settings and sent them over. So everything should be good. That is now done. It's already crafted those 10. And then this is just going to make it even faster. We're also going to have machines end up kicking on because every time we do this, it's going to extend their buffer. So now we have even more buffer space that's happening. We're noticing just things just happen. There's just so much is happening, and it's going to happen so fast. So now let's make the highest tier, which is the elite. And this will make these machines as fast as they can go. And of course, the only way we can make these machines faster is by just having more machines per one pattern provider. That's really it. And then when we build our crafts, we can just set it up to craft 4 at a time, and the pattern providers hopefully will spill over into each other. And a way that you can do that, by the way, is whenever you set these up, whenever it says ignore more contents in target inventory, this blocking mode is really nice. It says do not push pattern ingredients to inventories that contain a pattern input. This is another use case for this. So if you had 4 machines wrapped around this pattern provider, you could set that up so that way it can detect that and block the input. That way it'll kind of spread its inputs to the other machines that are surrounding that pattern provider. So just something to note in that case. It is very handy for that particular task. I love how while I was talking there, these had already completed, and now this is just going to be insanely fast. And now one thing I definitely want to make with this is, let's see, from Mech is the atomic disassembler. This thing right here is a fantastic tool. Now notice this requires refined obsidian. This is another material that we can make. So it just requires that refined obsidian dust that we have over here. And we can just drop that into our compressor that we already have set up. And that's going to make that refined obsidian that we were needing. And of course we can set up an AutoCraft pattern for that because we're going to have some leftover refined obsidian dust inside of our system. That's where that 64 comes into play. Now I know this bothers a lot of people, but there is an upgrade we can put in here that will muffle the sound. But if you want some more detailed control, we can just look up Mekanism and we can see the individual machines that are making sounds in here. And we can just limit them quite a bit. They're still making noise. I like to hear them ever so slightly, but they're definitely not as loud and obnoxious as they were before. So back to that atomic disassembler, right? This thing is amazing and definitely worth making if you can afford it. Very, very simple once you have all this set up, of course. You can see we can just insta-craft those items now. And then we can request all of them again by holding down Control, by the way, once you have a pattern up and running. And I should be able to now, I think, just request this. Yeah. So atomic disassembler, very, very cool, and should start charging. This thing has a couple of modes, and it also has a hotkey. And by default, that key is in. So if you hold down in, you can pull up a wheel that allows you to change the different modes of your tools. And this is going to work for the atomic disassembler and also for the configurator, which we probably should craft at this point as well. And also definitely get this set up on AutoCraft. So all of these fancy things, it's just one AutoCraft after another. But we'll eventually have everything down the road. But the configurator has a ton more materials. So whenever we get this up and running, there we go. I can show you this one as well. This has a lot more options on the wheel. You can see you can just instantly switch between wrench, rotate, items, fluids. It makes it a whole lot easier to change your configurator now. But it's also very nice for this because sometimes you want to break normal, which isn't very fast. Like it's just a normal pickaxe speed. But sometimes you want to break insanely fast, and that's where having that fast mode is beautiful. You can just almost insta-break everything. The atomic disassembler is one of those tools that is very fast and essentially breaks every other modded tool out there because it can break dirt and log. It breaks everything, and it's just so insanely fast. But it's also one of my personal favorites because it solves that problem of it just being too fast sometimes. And so you can find a middle ground. You can also make it very slow. It's nice. It's very, very helpful. And so now for one last hoorah, let's go ahead and see how fast can it now craft up 64, an entire stack of atomic alloy. And all we have to do is let this run. This is now max upgraded, and we can now count this and physically see it working. This is just absolutely bonkers how quick now this is running, and they're done. 64 atomic alloy, the top tier alloy for Mekanism, finished, and now giving us access to dive deeper into all of the amazing machines that Mekanism has to offer. And so with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you'll learn something new, whether it is about subnets, about applied energistics, about that new Flux addition to applied energistics, which I'm looking forward to using in a different way in the future, and also diving into how to automate Mekanism. So guys, if you did enjoy, like I said, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video a huge thumbs up. That really helps to go a long ways. And also comment down below, what's your favorite tool in modded Minecraft? I would love to hear from you down in the comments below, especially if you made it to this point in the video. It's a way to let me know that you definitely watched the whole thing, which I really do appreciate. And now it's time for me to appreciate the supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to Floff. Thank you so much, by the way, for your amazing support by choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting me in one of the best ways possible. I really do appreciate you. I will see you, of course, in the next episode. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye!